From Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and the studios of 850 AM WFTL, this is Outlaw, America's alternative voice.
Streaming around the world at outlawshow.com.
This week, a commercial-free broadcast featuring our very special guest, Congressman Alcee Hastings of Florida's 23rd Congressional District. Your host for Outlaw, equal rights activist and former Fort Lauderdale City Commissioner, Dean Trantalis.
Good evening. My name is Dean Trantalis, and welcome to Outlaw, America's alternative voice. Tonight's show is going to be commercial-free, as we have a special guest here tonight, Congressman Alcee Hastings. Welcome, Congressman.
Thank you again for having me here.
Absolutely. We're honored to have you here. This is the 12th and final show of our series as we continue the journey into a historic approach to educate, challenge, and to provoke listeners into hearing and understanding issues that directly affect members of the gay community, as well as their families, their friends, and co-workers. This is the first time a South Florida radio program will feature matters that exclusively focus on the gay community, and each week we will be presenting guests who will speak to us about a topic most likely you've heard about in the news. We will explore history, we will entertain hopes, and we will invite you, the listener, to call in and participate. The gay community is often referred to as the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered community, LGBT for short. Each day, its members are challenged by discrimination and the consequences of bigotry that are often left unchecked by rules which govern our society. Outlaw will serve as a new voice, an alternative voice, to the messages heard most often in the mainstream media. It will act as an outlet for those whose voices cannot otherwise be heard. And through this dialogue, it will hopefully uncover new ways to put an end to injustice and inequality. Tonight, by inviting Congressman Hastings to our show, there's no specific topic we're going to discuss, but in fact we are going to talk to Congressman Hastings and a little bit about his background in politics and his impact on issues that have directly affected the progress of equal rights within the gay community.
Right. And
you certainly have been there for us all the years, Congressman.
Well, thank you so much, Dean. I think it's fortuitous that we're here on the weekend, that many activities in the country and in this community are ongoing, centered around the life and work of Dr. Martin Luther King and many of his associates. It brings to mind many things for me, and if you would permit me, I'd like to talk about my early childhood and the fact that as a politician, many politicians are patronizing to the gay and lesbian and bisexual and transgender community. I was born in Altamont Springs, Florida in 1936.
So you're a native Floridian? A
native. All of my life, with the exception of going away to go to school, I'm indigenous to this great state of ours. I was born in September, Sylvester was born in August, and George was born in September as well. Both of them were gay. And when we went to school, the teachers knew that. And this is in the halcyon days of segregation. And what the teachers recognized immediately is that George and Sylvester would play with the girls. We had a beautiful setting at Rosenwald Elementary School in Altamont Springs, and there was high grass near a lake, and they would plait the grass and plait the girls' hair and what have you. And early on, they were called sissies and punks. Those were two expressions of intolerance that I began to hear at age 6, and remember it as if it were yesterday. By the time I went to high school, I came in contact with another George and Earl, and the teachers knew that they were gay, and what they did was, rather than have them in shop or in agriculture, they let them take typing. And until this day, boys that went to that high school, as did I, were not permitted to type. I tell you that for the reason...
They were not permitted to type?
You're not permitted to even be in the typing class, so I didn't learn to type early. Also in Altamont Springs, the second openly gay child was about maybe 3 or 4 years behind me, and his mother and father were extremely tolerant. Ruby and Nathaniel were, and many of us would babysit Dennis. And when Dennis was a little boy, he would wear his mother's clothing, and as he grew, he would do things that were natural to his being. And I learned then that I didn't care for people that were bullying or taking advantage of these people. Then I went on to Fisk University. At the time that I attended Fisk University, beginning in 1953, during the McCarthy era, I might add, and thank you for giving me this time, one of the most intolerant things that I've seen in my life transpired in my freshman year at Fisk University. A man that was an African-American fellow came there as the dean of the university. And Fisk had been notoriously known through the years for its music department and its science department. 3/4 of the faculty were white. A substantial number of them were gay. And at the very same time, I would think, without trying to give an absolute quantification, that at least 1/4 of the male students were homosexual. And this man came and developed a list, and he started putting people out of school because they were gay. In this same community, Broward County, I represented school teachers that were dismissed from school because they were gay. So I didn't wait until I got elected to Congress to be involved in these issues. I advocated against the dean, started a movement on campus against him. All of the period of time of the other people that you talked about, they were my friends. And I'm not talking about anything more than what a friend would be. And at times when other fellows were playing cops and robbers, I would play with George and Sylvester because nobody would play with them.
Well, were they at that stage of your life, did you notice that they were being bullied or harassed by?
Indeed.
They were all the time.
Indeed, all the time, called names. Another fella, Lewis and I used to have to, we went down the same path, a lot of us going home, and we would have to ward off the other fellows for just wanting to push them around and fight them. Now, Sylvester was openly gay, and George was not over the course of time. George went on to become a second lieutenant in the segregated army period, and he died not having revealed his orientation. Sylvester is since deceased as well, but was from the very beginning very much openly gay. That level of intolerance that existed then has reduced itself some, but I find in political circles especially, people will say things like, you as a white person, you and I probably call people out when we hear racial remarks and homophobic remarks, but a lot of people don't.
Right.
And they are constant in our society, and what happens in the political realm is you will have people say ugly things when they think others are not around,
or are sympathetic or unwilling to respond. Now, you mentioned earlier that this being an important weekend.
Yes.
For the African American community, but I think you also alluded to the fact that this is an important weekend in which the issue of discrimination is something that needs to be discussed at every level, whether
Absolutely.
It's race, sexual orientation, religion, and clearly Martin Luther King, because I am a child of the 60s and grew up in that era. He and his contemporaries brought the issue of discrimination to the living rooms of
Without
white
question.
America, and that became very uncomfortable.
Yeah, to the living room, via television, and the most celebrated aspect of his life that is talked about more than anything is the famous speech at the March on Washington.
Right.
What is not known by a lot of people, and I spoke about this last night in Gifford, and I've spoken about it around the nation at a given time. a person whose name is Bayard Rustin is not known, and Bayard was gay. Bayard Rustin is the person that was the brain trust for the March on Washington.
Is that right?
And a lot of people don't know that. And Bayard...
we certainly put on a good parade.
The proof is in the pudding.
Right.
But so was another of Martin's aides, a gay person. Clearly, he was tolerant in more ways than one, just in black and white relations.
Right.
And therefore, a celebration of his life should include the fact that he was an inclusive person.
Well, I think the Reverend Jesse Jackson coined the phrase, if I may paraphrase him, that discrimination against one is discrimination against all.
Without question.
And it's a mantra that he later enshrined, but certainly Martin Luther King followed in his on his march to Washington.
Right, and the whole of the civil rights movement was also a human rights movement. And as it pertains to the issues of the day with gays and lesbian, bisexual and transgendered persons, it is a human rights issue, and it can be defined and should be as a civil rights issue as well, because of the level of discrimination and the fact that this society cannot get to the point of live and let live. I must go on just a minute more. I'm always astounded when we talk about the Respect for Marriage Act, that those that would discriminate and disallow people an opportunity to be in committed relationships feel threatened. Hell, I got divorced, and it wasn't because of nobody that was homosexual that I got divorced. It didn't threaten my marriage, or I had other issues, as do other people. And in the states where marriage is allowed between people who choose to get married or that happen to be gay or lesbian, the simple facts are there to see the statistics. They remain in committed relationships longer than do so-called straight people.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because the idea of discrimination certainly permeates into many different areas of our life, and your being in Congress, and how many terms have you now served?
This is my ninth term.
Ninth term.
Actually, the 10th term. I'm sorry, right. I was already thinking of the next election. Yeah, I'm there 19 years.
19 years, mm-hmm. and you've seen the evolution of the rhetoric and what's going on. But getting back to the 60s. I remember growing up, and people lived that time where it was all about tolerance, acceptance, inclusion. When did it come? When did America take that sharp turn and become exclusive, judgmental, intolerant? You hear the Republican presidential candidates, they don't talk about inclusion. They are judgmental. Mm-hmm. They are, if you don't live to a certain standard, and in this case, in many cases, a Christian standard, mm-hmm. You're not measuring up to the American way, and that's how it's being characterized. When did that happen? Mm-hmm. What do you? I mean, I can't pinpoint the moment.
No, and I don't think I can as well. I think it has ever been thus, and therefore, the awakening that transpired in the age of Aquarius, for lack of a better expression, that awakening came about after a long period of suppression of rights of individuals, women's rights. If you recall, the National Organization of Women was coming out right at about that very same time. But the basic persons who rest on this judgmental notion have always been there, but there was such a movement, and it was involved with so many young people, and coupled with all of those things were the protests against the Vietnam War,
right.
and it was overwhelming.
Right.
But even establishment Democrats and Republicans were still railing against it. And let's go back to Dr. King. Very few people are willing, particularly among African Americans, to admit that at the time of his death, he was under really heavy attack from the white community because of being opposed to Vietnam, and in the black community because they were saying that he was agitating too much. The old guard civil rights people, A. Philip Randolph, Roy Wilkins,
Right.
Whitney Young, many of them saw Martin as an agitator,
Right.
and the only thing that balanced it for him was the likes of Rap Brown and Stokely Carmichael, who took it to yet another level.
Well, he looked like he was middle of the road.
That aspect of judging others and not being able to answer, for my purposes, the question of are we not our brother's keeper, and are we not all God's children? And that's why I part company with the fundamentalists who are judgmental. You have preachers that go into the pulpit whose organists are gay, and they are standing there talking about gay people, and they wouldn't even have their choir if it wasn't for many of the persons who are gay. So it's been ever thus.
And it's been so somehow it seems to be they've taken on a more majority. I don't know if they're in the majority or whether the rhetoric is in the majority, but clearly the people that grew up in the 60s are now the people who are part of that majority that are suddenly condemning lives and lifestyles, rights and ways of life that I think that somewhere along the line we either got very comfortable with ourselves and decided that we are perfect as a people, and therefore we don't want to change things, and thus conservatism suddenly became a popular phrase in our country, because
and liberalism was condemned.
Right. And so, but now we see where conservatism has lived in the White House for a generation, and what has it created? It's turned our entire lives upside down. But no one is willing to, those within the Conservative Party haven't yet to admit. I mean, before we began the show, you said that the last month in which George W. Bush was in office, that January, we lost 900,000 jobs.
The first month of Barack Obama's tenure. Remember, the Toxic Asset Relief Program was offered by Harry Paulson, the treasurer of George Bush, when he came with 3.5 pieces of paper asking for $780 billion.
Correct.
And then
that was a year before Barack Obama was even elected.
The November before, we had a special session of Congress to address it, and had we not done so, for all of those who would argue against it, be they Tea Partiers or Occupy Wall Streeters, the simple fact of the matter is, had it not been done, we would be in much more desperate straits. And I get sick and tired of hearing people talk about the stimulus program. The curve toward a recession was extraordinary during the Bush period. And the simple fact of the matter is, not only that January after Obama was sworn in, but the 6 months previous, we had lost private sector jobs on a continuing basis. And so the glide path is going to be very steep for a very long period of time. During that period of time, what happens, Dean, is people get scared and they get fearful. And the things that you can lash out against are the things that give greater comfort.
And that are the most vulnerable.
That's right. Yeah. So you go after gay people, you go after poor people, you go after old people, and the old people and poor people should be the people that we should be protecting. And what they tend to forget, it's as if every family I know that's a large family, has a member in that family that's either gay or
poor
lesbian.
or
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And they try to act as if it's not happening. It's like this government is supposed to be bad, And so let's just say, I heard some lady from South Carolina say yesterday, cut the government in half. Well, okay, so cut the government in half. Cut half of Social Security, cut half of Medicare, cut half of the military, and cut the half of the road money. Just go down, just cut it in half. And I wonder how many Republicans would lose their jobs during that same period of time. It's as if
there's a disconnect between the reality and the talk.
It's the strangest thing.
Well, let's talk a little
society.
bit about let's talk a little bit about your involvement in some of the really high-profile issues in Congress regarding the gay community. And the one that stands out the most recent accomplishment under the Obama administration, has been the repeal of discrimination within the military.
Yes, don't ask, don't tell.
Don't ask, don't tell, which supposedly was supposed to have been more helpful towards the gay community, but in fact became more of an inquisition within the ranks. So now we've completely eliminated that, so that anybody who is gay or lesbian now has the right to serve within the military. And those who are listening need to know that Congressman Hastings was at the forefront in seeing that accomplished. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the history and the kind of resistance you were getting from the other side?
Considerable resistance, but at the very same time, deeply involved in that effort. How I came to be very high profile involved was by virtue of service on the Intelligence Committee. And many of the persons that speak Arabic and are able to translate some of the languages that are being used to pursue bad interests, they were being put out of the military. And I just thought that's the craziest thing that I could imagine.
A fellow named Dan Choi.
Yeah, I know Lieutenant Choi extremely well.
Was a particular example.
Right, but there were others. He was a pilot, but I'm talking people that were in the intelligence community that were operating basically listening and translating what was being said. And we put a whole lot of those people out of the military, and we put ourselves in a lot of jeopardy, even as I speak, for the reason of not allowing them to serve. And then there were 14,000. At one point, I remember there were 8,500 persons. It's now 14,000 that had been discharged from the military. And you know something, it's really easy to sit here and talk about it, but to have to struggle to get 218 votes in the House of Representatives, and to see these people, I might add 3 that I know that are gay in the closet,
in the House
of Representatives, and to see them hypocritically making the argument that there's going to be a problem. You bring to them, you tell them Israel, England, Canada, all over the world, people have people that are gay serving in the military. And here, the country that is the beacon of tolerance, allegedly, for the world, would disallow members to serve in the military. And you know something else? This is football season, and it's almost like there ain't no gay football players, no gay baseball players, no gay basketball players. That doesn't exist if you let the He-Man tell you what's going on. So I got involved. I'm glad I did, and it was even beginning with Clinton's measures. He ticked me off with the affirmative action measures by not taking them straight on. If you recall, it was mend it, don't end it. I mean, come on, people. That was just an example of I take no prisoners when it comes to discrimination and how we should address it. Right. And that's what needs to be done. We're talking about family issues of real live people, and as it pertains to the military, we're talking about the national security of this nation, and it doesn't have any boundary. If this nation were to be attacked, whether people believe it or not, children would take up arms that could shoot a gun. So why would we talk about not having someone who happens to be gay in the military? That's crazy.
Well, and so you approached it from a national security perspective, and clearly,
and human rights,
right. and the combination still was an affront to those who were determined to only see with blinders how America should live, despite the fact that it was jeopardizing our future.
Dean, you know the stories of, let's change and use an analogy of women who wear short shorts. There are some men, if she gets raped, they say she asked for it.
Right.
That's what happened with Matthew Shepard. I saw people on the floor of the House of Representatives arguing that he was the cause of what happened to him. And I for the life of me, find it just totally insensitive. Now, I have friends, Bonnie Frank, for example, and I talk about this issue. I sit next in Rules Committee to Jared Polis, and this nation would do itself proud, and the gay community needs to get involved. We can talk about the problems, the issues, and how people like me got involved, but the gay community needs to get involved. You were in office at one point, Dean. Others need to run for office, that GLBT, and put these issues out there and not go off in some hiding, named a closet. Just go on and say. Tammy Baldwin, for example, from Wisconsin, is running from the United States Senate. Everybody listening to this program, and is about fundraising, I know, but all gay people ought to send Tammy a contribution.
And she's going to be down here, and we're going to have
she's carrying the water of the community. Right. The same with yours truly. Here I am. I've been avant-garde on these issues. I didn't just go to the gay rights parades when I went to Congress. I went to them before I went to Congress. I've been going. Yeah, I know. You understand what I'm saying?
You've been coming to meetings of the Dolphin Democratic Club for as long as I can remember.
Exactly. So it's not. It is a part of a tolerant being to be tolerant, and so we have other fights ahead of us.
And we're going to take a break
right
after this message, and from our local station, and I believe news and weather in the meantime. And so we'll be right back, and to discuss exactly just that, Congressman.
Okay.
Thank you.